We're joined now from Washington by Senator Bob Casey. Senator, yesterday, Senator John McCain said that Vladimir Putin was essentially taking advantage of the Obama administration's failed policy in Syria. What is your reaction to that?
Well, I don't agree with that assessment, but I do think the administration has to be very clear now, not only in implementing either a new strategy or an updated strategy, but communicating the elements of that strategy. I think it has to be a very focused approach. I would suggest, and I said this to Secretary Kerry in a recent letter, that we've got to focus on a couple of objectives. Bringing about a negotiated end to this conflict, and the United States has to lead that. Secondly, to make sure that we're pushing other countries to contribute more humanitarian assistance. And thirdly, we've got to be very tough in insisting that the UN Security Council enforce all of the resolutions that apply to Syria. And fourthly, we may have to consider military options that we hadn't considered before.
But, Senator, has the U.S. foreign policy there in Syria helped to create the conditions for a power vacuum?
Well, you've got two things going on at the same time. You've got the threat posed by ISIS and what that means for the region, as well as the ongoing Syrian conflict. I believe they're obviously related, and that if you don't deal directly with the Syria question, you can't aggressively and thoroughly be able to confront ISIS. So we've got to do both at the same time, and we have to be able to achieve those ends that I just outlined in a manner that's not just expeditious, but is focused on a policy that people can understand and that people hear about on a regular basis. That's one of my concerns about the administration. There has to be more communication about objectives and about whether or not we're achieving those objectives.
So you've given us a list of things that the U.S. needs to do in Syria. In your opinion, what has the U.S. done right so far?
Well, so far you have in Syria an alignment of interests, I think. You've got on the one side, you have, in other words, you've got the Russian Federation, which is in conflict with us there, but on our side you've got the potential for a coalition to make progress. We've got to insist that the Saudis help a lot more. Now we have some help from the Turks, both on the ISIS question as well as on Syria. But my concern is that we don't seem to have specific objectives. I don't think it's a question of awareness of the threat or the problem. I think it's really a question of what our objectives are.
So Vladimir Putin has said very clearly that he feels as though there is an unknown if Bashar al-Assad is no longer the president in Syria, that the replacement could be worse. Does he have a point?
No, I don't think he has a point, because from the beginning, and I was probably the first U.S. senator to say this, Mr. Assad should go. There shouldn't be any ambiguity about that. I realize that the Russian Federation doesn't agree with that, but it would be in the best interest of the people of Syria as well as the region for Assad to go. He's driving not only the opposition in Syria, he's helping and contributing to the problem that ISIS poses right now. So Assad has to go. That has to be one of the ultimate objectives. How we get there is going to be very important, and I think at some point the Russians may be on the same page on that. They're not now. But I think Assad over time is a major problem for the Russians. As much as they're trying to continually back him up and fund him, he is an expensive problem for them. Our goal should be to have him removed. We do have to think about the day after. What happens to Syria the day after? The State Department has to analyze that along with our allies. But there's no question that Assad in place is bad for the people of Syria. It makes it impossible for them to achieve their legitimate aspirations when he's barrel bombed them, when he's hit schools and hospitals and wiped out most of the 250,000 people who are killed, and that might be a low number. He's done most of the killing. He's done most of the imposing most of the horror on that country. And right now, based upon what we've seen in the last 24 hours, not to mention many, many months, Mr. Putin is contributing to that horror. and we've got to be very clear with Mr. Putin about what he is contributing and has contributed to the scene and the loss of life in Syria.
Last question on that point. There are indications, as you know, that the Russians targeted U.S.-backed rebels in Syria during their airstrikes yesterday. How concerned are you that things could escalate into a proxy war between the U.S. and Russia?
Well, I don't think we're at that stage yet, but there's no question there's a fundamental dispute, and I have little doubt. Now, I haven't seen the intelligence to affirm it or to validate it, but my gut tells me that the strikes that Russia engaged in yesterday, based upon the reporting, not just my gut, were in non-ISIS controlled areas, which leaves only one other possibility. They were targeted at rebel sites or in rebel areas to help the Assad regime. We have to be, as I think the Secretary Kerry was yesterday, we've got to be very clear that we're not going to tolerate that. Now, I don't think that means just because of one day of strikes and one day of conflict or tension that leads to some kind of a proxy war. The good news here for just the last 24 hours is that Secretary Kerry is engaged directly with Mr. Lavrov, and I think they've been very blunt in the exchange of ideas. I do think, though, that they both have some understanding about how to move forward. They have a fundamental disagreement on how to deal with Assad. There's a fundamental disagreement about the actions Russia has taken, but I think we're not at the stage of a proxy war yet.
All right, Senator Bob Casey in Washington. Senator, thank you for your time.
Good to be with you. Thank you.